the Trump regime is not handling it very well over the mass exodus at the Department of Justice. We've previously reported how there were 6 prosecutors who quit from the Minneapolis federal prosecutor's office, at least 4 prosecutors who quit from the Maine justice after Donald Trump and the regime had ordered these prosecutors to criminally investigate the widow of Renee Colgood. And now this brings the total of attorneys that have quit, resigned, have been forced out of the DOJ close to around 3,000. But what we're seeing is a few things. Number one, you have Pam Bondi basically saying these are woke DOJ lawyers. These were your lawyers who were handling your prosecution of fraud in Minneapolis that you all pretended you cared about. And now you just push them out. And so who's going to be doing prosecutions like that? And then separately, what they're doing as well is they're moving in just anybody who's willing to carry out whatever the regime wants. I mean, they've launched a criminal investigation into Governor Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey because of their press conferences regarding ICE's invasion into the state and into the city. Here's the Fox Bulletin moments ago. Here, play this clip.
Breaking tonight, Fox News confirms the Justice Department is investigating Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey for allegedly impeding law enforcement efforts on the ground. Again, confirming that DOJ investigation.
Right over here, let's talk about what Pam Bondi had to say when she was on state regime media. Let's play it.
What happened in Minnesota? We had 6 prosecutors who suddenly decided they didn't want to support the men and women in ICE. One of them was busy doing a photo shoot with the New York Times while ICE was out there risking their lives. So they came, they said, we want to resign, but we want to use our annual leave up until April, meaning they wanted the taxpayers to pay for them to go on vacation because they decided they didn't want to support law enforcement. So the breaking news tonight, I fired them all. They're fired from the office. And our U.S. attorney there, Rosen, he's great. He was just confirmed 3 months ago. So he has his hands full. And that's what we're facing around the country, the deep state, in many of these offices. And we learned these people had been out there interviewing at liberal law firms prior to this. But I'll tell you what, from a personnel level, they'd be an HR nightmare. So people better look into them. One of them actually in 2022 defended BLM when they burned down a pawn shop and someone was murdered. Yeah, they want to be part of the resistance. Yeah, bring it on. They're not going to be working for Donald Trump and the Department of Justice any longer. But that's what we're up against, not only in Minnesota, but around this country.
All right, I want to ask Harry Litman. Harry, Talking Feds Substack, Talking Feds podcast. So we're seeing 2 things happen right here. On the one hand, they're getting rid of any prosecutors who have a modicum of decency and following the DOJ handbook. And on the other hand, they're I don't know if this is being launched out of Maine justice. I don't know if this is Tom. At this point, is it just Bondi and Blanche who are basically now it's like a small lawyer shop at this point, and they're just going after Donald Trump picks up the phone and says, do this, do that. What's going on here, Harry?
You know, it is really totalitarianism run amok. So not only are they taking orders from the White House, but they're doing it based on just raw political reasons, you know, even the completely improper prosecutions, and they're going to go down both of them for being selective and vindictive, of Comey and James, was Trump's sort of score settling, a petty personal thing. He's locked in a political battle that he is losing in Minnesota, because anyone who sees the viciousness of the ICE shooting and generally turns against him. And that's when he's deploying the criminal power of the federal government to try to just cow and push around. Just a couple things, but we could really talk about this for hours. Ben, first of all, the notion we're talking about what Walz and Frey have done. They've been in press conferences where they've supported the people of Minnesota's right to push back peacefully, almost always protest, and that's all they're supporting the invasion of ICE. Pure First Amendment activity down the middle of what the framers wrote the First Amendment for. They're going to try now to recast it as a crime. This is a guy, by the way. I mean, Trump has called Walz, the vice presidential candidate, a buffoon and dumb and corrupt and every name in the book. And it is simply this no holds bar war. They have, as Walz has put in his lawsuit, or Minnesota's lawsuit, it's just an invasion. And the more they mess it up, the more they double down, send hundreds more, etc. On to Bondi. And it's getting increasingly hard even to listen to her. But that viciousness, first of all, of course, wants to deny them these 8 prosecutors. Why did they quit? As you said, you have this horrifying murder, you have this horrifying killing that everyone sees and could very well be a 242 terrible crime under federal law. And they tell them, you can't investigate that, but you should go after the widow. After all they've endured for a year of the Trump 2.0 regime, that they choose that time to resign speaks volumes as their loudest, most professional, eloquent dispute. And she, Bondi, wants to just like trash him around, beat him up and say, I fired them. They didn't resign. And with these gratuitous, how about that they're interviewing with liberal law firms. What does that even mean? And that they would be HR disasters because one had the nerve to say in 2022 with much of the country to say the terrible epithet Black Lives Matter. This is just so venomous and over the top. And again, it's transparently designed to just score points and inject misery into the lives of Minnesota officials for actually doing, of course, what public officials are supposed to do. Encourage their citizens, tell them to be lawful about it, the very thing, now that I think about it, that Trump wouldn't do on January 6th. But it is vile by almost leaps and bounds where they've been already, which was damn vile enough, because it's just raw political reprisal to try to influence Minnesota, and because it's so completely contrary to the First Amendment, what public officials do, etc. And then, speaking as an ex-DOJer, that she refused to give them the dignity of resigning and doing this silent professional protest to the conduct of the Department of Justice is, really, really low class in my view.
I want people to know this about you, Harry. You were a leader in the Western District of Pennsylvania's prosecutor's office. I mean, you ran the office. You were a United States attorney. That was the number one person at the office. At Maine Justice, you had a top job there where you supervised a lot of people who supervised a lot of people who supervised a lot of people. So even as a leader federal prosecutor, as you were, the behavior that you saw there of Pam Bondi as a level of moral character in this profession of ours, what these lawyers did in leaving, by the way, they didn't go and leave and slam her. They didn't go out on the news, and they could have, and say she's the worst. Or, I mean, there are some who have done that. There are some who didn't. These were people who, look, don't force me to prosecute this widow. Like, I ain't going to do that. Okay. And don't make me not look into where I think there's a crime that we all saw on TV, with the shooter. We at least need to investigate, the killer of Renee Nicole Good, because that's what prosecutors do. And we observed it. Like, we bear witness. So don't act like, don't do that. They did it quietly, privately. And then she goes on TV and says, nobody hire them. These people are unprofessional. They don't deserve a job.
Right.
It goes to a whole other area.
It really did. Look, it is perverse. Her job is to support her troops, but her job is not to. I mean, what she said, given the video we saw, there's no logical escape from saying you're not supporting ICE, the men and women of ICE. That has to mean that she sees it as their job to support the men and women of ICE, no matter what the fuck they do. I mean, the very pro-ICE position would be we're for them when they adhere to the law, maybe even judgment calls, but we must. It's our solemn responsibility, not to mention the counterpoint to being able to support them most of the time, to actually pushing back hard when they violate the law. And her very notion, she said nothing about the merits, but the mere fact that they're saying after they, like everyone else in the country, saw this harrowing video, man, this really requires a serious look because federal law may have been broken in a very, very grave way. That they could even entertain that notion goes against the Trump credo of where, for ICE, no matter how brutal they are, no matter what rights they trench, etc. And of course, just throwing her prosecutors. These are loyal prosecutors, brother. They've been there for the year. As you've mentioned, this guy had been acting U.S. attorney. They've done the big fraud prosecutions in the office. What they've done is the great sin of saying, like, 2/3 of the legal community in the country, if not more, sure looks like there's something to look at here. For that, as you say, they're not only she not only fires them, but essentially tells people you can't hire them. They are, demeans them and defames them on their way out of office. Man, oh man, she is just a disgrace of an attorney general.
Everybody, make sure you subscribe to Harry Litman's Substack. It's called Talking Feds, Talking Feds Substack, Talking Feds podcast, and Talking Feds YouTube channel. Everybody check it out.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.